a case that has already led to mass resignations from career DOJ prosecutors. Let's start the show with Congressman Troy Carter, Democrat of Louisiana and first vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congressman, let's start with the breaking news. We just heard from the president leaving the Daytona 500 in Florida. Take a listen to his response to a question about rising egg prices.
Reached an all-time high. What's your administration? Egg prices have reached an all-time high.
It was a long, before I ever got here, it was at an all-time. This didn't, remember, I've been here for 3 weeks. And when you saw the inflation numbers, I've been here for 3 weeks. I have had nothing to do with inflation. This was caused by Biden. I had 4 years of virtually no inflation. So I'm just taking over. But I'll tell you what, this country has made more progress in the last 3 weeks than it's made in the last 4 years.
This country's made more progress in the last 3 weeks, he's saying, than they have in 4 years. Of course, that's his assessment. What's your reaction, Congressman?
Reverend, now it appears that our president has a sense of selective memory. This is the president who said on day one he was going to bring the price of eggs down. On day one, the price of groceries would go down. On day one, his presidency would end the war in Ukraine. At some point, the American people have to realize they've been duped. They've been boonswoggled. This president is a salesman of sorts, but not a salesman of goods, a salesman of false dreams and suggesting to people that he has a magic wand. And then when it's time to perform, he blames it on the last person. I'll remind you that our economy was strong both times he took over the presidency, and within a very short period, he took it to the bottom. And he's on his way doing it again. When you look at the price of milk and the price of eggs, and you look at his tariffs, the very people who supported him, his own people who are now having voters' remorse because they can't produce and sell their products. Farmers who are now being interviewed saying they've been duped and admittedly that they voted for President Trump, but say resoundingly that they would not vote for him again. This is just 3 weeks. He's right. 3 weeks into his term, and already the havoc is being spread throughout our country.
And it's just 3 weeks. But let's get to the budget. You and Speaker Mike Johnson both hail from Louisiana, where many of the Speaker's own constituents rely heavily on food aid and other social services that he and the administration, the Donald Trump administration, want to cut. Politico is reporting some Republicans in swing districts are nervous that these cuts may hurt their voters and ultimately cost them their seats. How do you see this budget battle playing out? And what would it take for Democrats to consider supporting a plan if Republicans cannot unify themselves?
I will tell you that my Republican colleagues all over the country, many of which I've had the opportunity to speak with, and in private they will say that they are concerned and they're worried, but in public they can't because they're afraid that this president will primary them. So, but in private, they get it. They understand that these sweeping suggested cuts are going to paralyze Americans. It's going to paralyze farmers. It's going to paralyze our research universities, Tulane University, LSU University. There's some $40 billion in drastic cuts to research that we are working feverishly to find a cure for cancer. This is impacting not just Democrats. If you want to look at waste, abuse, and fraud, we're all for that. This is not about waste, abuse, and fraud. These are unilateral cuts, layoffs, and deep cuts into areas that keep our country going. And they're obviously doing it without any knowledge of facts.
Now, on that point, the White House now is slashing government agencies with seemingly little regard for the law or maybe even national security. NBC News is reporting the administration is now trying to scrambling They're scrambling to try to rehire National Nuclear Security Administration workers it laid off last week. And they can't even figure out how to contact some of the people they let go. You sit on the Homeland Security Committee. What is your response to this recklessness?
It's demonstrative of giving the keys to the car for someone who can't drive. Giving the keys to the car to Elon Musk, who is an unelected individual, an unelected millionaire, billionaire, who now has his newest toy. This is a huge Etch-a-Sketch for him. Except when you screw this up, you can't simply shake the glass and make it go away. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about businesses. We're talking about people's health. We're talking about the sanctity and the strength of our democracy. We're talking about our relationships on a world scale that are being damaged every day by this billionaire who's playing Monopoly with people's lives.
Now, Louisiana, let's go to your home state and the home state of the Speaker Johnson. Louisiana has received more direct aid from FEMA in the last decade than nearly every other state. Yet the president has called for FEMA's elimination, and Elon Musk is looking at big cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which, of course, tracks hurricanes like those that regularly hit Louisiana. Trump says that states should be responsible for their own disaster management. Can Louisiana, one of the poorest states in the U.S., realistically do that if FEMA's abolished?
We cannot. We cannot, nor can any other state. If you're going to get rid of FEMA, then you have to replace it with a very similar program that will do the exact same thing that FEMA did. In Louisiana, we know we have storms that come, they stay longer, they come stronger, and they leave more havoc in their path. The thought that the people of Louisiana would not have the benefit of having FEMA to come in or some like organization to provide resources before, during, and after a storm is an irresponsible act.
New today, more than 24 immigration judges, managers, and new hires let go by the Department of Justice. It comes amid a case backlog and a crackdown by President Trump. And joining me now is Kelly Doyle, one of the judges just laid off from the Justice Department's Executive Office for Immigration Review. Kelly, thank you for joining me. And I'm curious if this surprised you, this firing, and how you learned about it. What can you tell us?
Sure, happy to be here. I'm sorry it's a sad day that we're having to talk about a group of really dedicated professionals being fired. We received notice by email on Friday afternoon of the firing, and with everything going on, I guess I was not surprised overall. I kind of expected I wouldn't remain at the Department of Justice for very long, but I'm very disappointed because I was really looking forward to working for EOIR, supporting their mission and assisting with the immigration process.
Yeah. And look, NBC News, we can't independently verify that these firings were political, but do you think your firing was political? And were the fired judges all as new as you were, as many people have been fired elsewhere in the government have been, or what's your sense of all that?
So from what I understand, there were a couple of judges that have been fired in the last couple of weeks that have been more senior and even not necessarily on probation. But our class, as I recall, so the last group of judges that were going to be trained and brought onto the full-time to the bench were all relatively new hires who would have been hired since about June of last year from the last training.
Okay. So here's the head-scratching part. I mean, a lot of it is, but one significant part. These layoffs are coming as the immigration backlog grows, with 3.6 million cases still waiting to be heard by a judge.
Exactly.
What's the effect here?
Doesn't make any sense. No. And people could say, oh, it's only a few people, but every single judge that's on that bench contributes to helping the system work more efficiently, give people
Kelly,
their due process in court.
I've heard that some of these judges, I've heard, Carrie, that some of these judges can be 500 to 800 cases a year they'll deal with. So times
Yes, that's
that
expectation.
by, let's say, 10. I
Right.
mean, right there.
Right.
It's remarkable.
So every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. And the amount of time and money, resources, energy that went into recruiting people, hiring them, bringing them on board. I mean, my process alone was 14 months from interview to onboarding. And it makes no logical sense. And so there really doesn't seem to be any other explanation for this happening other than political motivation. And personally, I'm a little bit in a different position, having served in the Biden administration than my colleagues, but a number of them were military veterans, had worked for OPLA as immigration prosecutors. It was a pretty diverse group of people coming.
So, folks, Trump is absolutely infuriating everybody in his base. Except for the tech billionaires, everybody's pissed. Even some of the other rich and wealthy and well-connected MAGAs who are benefiting in some ways but aren't getting the dream that they dreamed up when they put the red hat on. But certainly the people getting screwed most of all are the regular voters who got duped into voting MAGA. And so it's happening on two fronts here. All these policies that are actually happening hurt working and middle and poor, working middle class and poor people. It's hurting all three of those groups. The high costs, and again, where's the no tax on tips, Donald? Where's the no tax on overtime, Donald? Where's the no tax on Social Security, Donald? You promised those things, whether or not those were good policies. You promised them, clear as day, multiple times, and you've put out a budgetary summary about what you want to do for the upcoming year, and that's not included. So you're screwing them by breaking some promises like that, but also the promises you're keeping insofar as you're doing them, you are counteracting your own vision. So notes there, the MAGA voter base is getting voter's remorse, and down at Mar-A-Lago, they are not happy. But even the committed ideologues, they want a quick, rapid mass deportation. That's what they want. It's inhumane and grotesque, and I don't support it, and I know, Matt, the vast majority of you don't either. But Trump is laying off the public servants that in some cases would make some of this stuff happen. And that the chaos he's creating and Elon is creating in the federal public service, yes, stops good programs and hurts good programs, but if we're being honest, it's also causing chaos. You can't do mass deportations when your focus is on firing hundreds of thousands of workers. Trump is creating absolute insanity down in Mar-A-Lago.